right now, which is what I was alluding to before. It's what I work on at Red Hat on a day in, day out basis. This is a big project, so I have to be a little bit selective about the sorts of things that I show you. We have a fairly large team developing it, working on various features. In some ways, like Errai has become like a platform on top of GWT. As I've told you before, I work at Red Hat as a research and development engineer. Specifically, I work in middleware, which means we cater to your typical like big company that wants to build like giant intranet applications, and now they kind of want to do some of that with mobile and stuff. So our kind of customers we have are big customers like Pfizer, New York Stock Exchange, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Those are the types of people who we deal with, and they live in a really enterprisey world, right? They live in this Java EE world. A lot of people will turn their nose up as soon as they hear that, but it's the reality in a lot of the corporate world. And so what I'm going to try and do is just try to explain to you what it is and sort of the problems that it solves. And I'm also going to do a live coding demo today. I'll show you some of the neat things that I think we bring to the GWT ecosystem. So this is GWT is a fantastic technology. Of course, it turns Java into JavaScript. We have decided to focus heavily on trying to build a UI framework which fits into the new HTML5 standard. I'm going to be showing that to you today. It's called Errai UI. And so so Errai is kind of one part HTML5, one part Java, and one part Java EE6, and one part GWT. The old logo, I guess. And so we kind of looked at what was happening in the web development world years ago, and this was before Node.js. But Errai is a really good analog for Node.js in some ways, and what we're trying to do. We took, when we first discovered the GWT compiler, the first thing that I started thinking about was, well, can we actually bring some of this server technology into the client as opposed to vice versa? Node tech kind of brings the client to the server in some ways with the JavaScript libraries that you typically would have associated with client-side development are now kind of moving it into the server. And we kind of do the opposite thing, right? We use Errai to bring the server to the client on top of GWT. And we bring lots of interesting things into the client, like CDI, JPA, and lots of other cool stuff. I'm going to be showing some of that to you today. Specifically, CDI and JPA are the two things that I plan on demoing today. And we can talk about how that works and stuff. And so these are like some of the key technologies that, and there's a lot more stuff coming, and I'll talk about that today as well. We're moving towards a huge 3.0 release this year, and so this list of key technologies is about to get bigger. So CDI is the context and dependency injection standard. It's JSR 299, which is part of the Java specifications body known as the Java community process. And it basically lays out a standard of how to build applications. It's basically like a standardized version of Spring or Juice. It's actually, Spring's a better analog because Juice is just DI. It doesn't have this concept of context. What context is this idea that not only does the CDI framework handle how to wire things together, it also handles like the life cycle, like what is the scope of this object and how long does it live and when does it die. And that's where the contexts come in. That's what that deals with in the specification. And so we're also going to be looking at JPA, the Java Persistence Framework, which this is something that I think actually has a really interesting place here. Maybe even more so in some ways than on the server side. I mean, JPA has a lot of drawbacks, as many people who've worked with it know. But I think it actually is an interesting fit here for client-side development. We'll look at that today. And we also support the JAX-RS API, which is also a Java standard, which stands for, oddly enough, Java API for RESTful Web Services. And we have this pure HTML5 templates technology. And so, Errai is really about standards and using the GWT compiler to achieve these standards on the client side. And so I'm just going to jump into a demo because I love love demos. I'm not a slides guy. I'm a very hands-on type guy. I like to show people things, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So what I did while I was sitting over there, I was getting ready. I got my IDE all up and going, and I basically created a blank project. I used our CDI archetype, which is a Maven archetype that you can use to create a project. It actually creates like a Hello World application that you can run. I have actually gone ahead and deleted all the stuff other than the basic configuration GWT XML file and such that it provides for me. So I can kind of start from scratch. The other thing that I'm going to be showing you today too is this is IntelliJ IDEA, which is an awesome IDE. It's my IDE of choice. It has been for a very long time. In fact, I started using this IDE back in 2002, if you can believe it. Before Eclipse even existed as a project, I've been a long-time user. And one of the things that we started working on with IntelliJ is we've been building a really cool plugin infrastructure that works well with the existing GWT plugin and adds support for a lot of the stuff we do in Errai, and you're going to see some of that now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'll take advantage of probably the easiest, this is probably the easiest thing to implement in the plugin. That was the ability to create new files. And I'm going to create this thing called a templated entry point. Now those are actually two annotations there, and I'll tell you what they mean. You'll probably guess. So first thing we've done here is I've created an entry point. This is a direct analog to the concept of the entry point interface in GWT. That's what we mean. It means that this class will be constructed when the page loads and will be displayed. And it's a templated widget, which means it is a widget. It extends composite. That's the GWT composite the actual abstract class there. And so it can be used as a regular GWT widget, and it can be composed with other GWT widgets. But it's backed by this HTML template here. And this is a pure HTML5 template. You can copy and paste that into W3C HTML5 validator, and it will happily tell you that it's valid HTML5. And that was a big important thing for us. Like I personally, I've done Swing development, and actually another one of our guys from the team worked for a company called SQL Power. They built this really huge Swing applications, actually several of them, like reporting applications. And so I don't hate Swing like people do, like a lot of people do, and I've built a lot of good applications using the programmatic UI, and I really like that. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that. But in the corporate world, you get this sort of hierarchy of developers, right? You get these developers who just like implement the business logic, and these guys who basically implement the UI logic, and then you have like a designer over here who's like spitting out HTML from like Dreamweaver or whatever, what have you. And so we have this. One of the biggest things that we heard when we were pushing GWT at Red Hat from people was that, well, we don't want to teach our designers how to create vertical panels and horizontal panels and compose them like that, and of course, UI Binder came along and it made it a little bit better, but then it was still like we don't want to teach our UI designers how to use this UI Binder markup. And so we kind of set out to sort of do it a little bit differently, and so we built this new way to compose widgets in GWT using pure HTML. And so I'll show that for you. I mean, I'll start this up in dev mode right now. We can kind of just see what this outputs here. This is a This is just the basic default app that my IDE created here. I'm assuming everyone can see this here. So that was just a simple, my data field and the click me button, which is what you would expect here. And you'll see here that there's this event handler here. I'll go ahead in here and I'll put like window alert, hello world in there. We can refresh this here, and you can probably you probably know what's going to happen here, and that of course pops up like that. Now, there's a few other things of interest here. You'll notice that I have these two @inject annotations and this @data field annotation. So what's actually going on here is we have we have essentially a UI compositor that we're running in the client right now that's actually scanning the DOM and finding these little things called these little data fields here, and they're providing to the client-side bean manager, which is the CDI stuff, the ability to look up these data fields and inject them into this bean. And so what is happening here is underneath the surface here we have this text my field here, and you'll see it correlates to this one here. In fact, you see this little guy here. This actually, if you click on that here, you'll see it'll actually jump right to that data field there. The IDE integration. Yeah, we can actually jump back and forth by hitting a little bit delayed because this is actually streaming video over Google Plus. So you can see that what's actually happening here is we're using the CDI programming model to inject the actual DOM element as a dependency and overlay it on top of the corresponding WIT widget, and that's what it's doing there. So we have for those of you who are like familiar how like WIT widgets work and stuff like that. Essentially, what's happening is the code that we've generated is doing a DOM lookup for this data field, my field. It's then seeing that we're injecting a text box, and there's this thing in the bean manager that's been created that knows how to construct the text box, and then it sets the element of that text box, that DOM element. So it actually really is, like, it actually is a real HTML that we're rendering in the browser as is. We're not transforming it or compiling it over it. We're just rendering it out as is, and we're wrapping a GWT widget around it, and it actually ends up working quite nicely. So let's play around. Let's play around with this and see what we can do. So let's go ahead here and let's think about this here for a second. Like what can we show off here? Well, I mean, one of the things that we can do, of course, is we can composite these things together. We can create multiple templated widgets. I'll go ahead and create another one. I'll call it item widget. And so it goes ahead and creates this templated widget, which I'll zoom in. Let's probably create and enhance the default zoom there. Let's just go ahead and create one of these from scratch. So I'll go ahead in here and I'll create like a span called data field, my text, like so. I'll jump back to that widget. Now if I go back and inject a data field over here, if I actually code complete on that, you'll see that the IDE integration is now aware of that data field's existence, and I can actually specify it right there, and we'll say private label like so. And let's see what can we do here. I'll go ahead and create a post construct. Actually, let's not do that. Let's actually show this off in a different way here. Let's go ahead and create some getters and setters here. And so I've created this thing called item widget over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and inject like an instance, which I'll show you what it does in a second. Okay, widget instance. Now what I'll do is I'll create a post construct over here and call it init. And when the app starts up, we'll go like root panel.get widget instance.get. Why is that? Why is there a problem with that? Oh, get add. Sorry. Widget instance.get. And you can see one of the nice things that we can now do, and if I go ahead and refresh this here, actually, let's create a post construct here. In fact, let's do something silly like just to show you how versatile all this is. In fact, I'll call that post construct method foo, and I'll set the text to, I don't know, like the current time millis or something. And we'll go back to our running app here, and we'll refresh this. And you can see that it created and instantiated that widget 3 times. It happened so quickly that we got the same value back. But you can see that the difference here between, like, say something like just using juice, is that we actually do have this concept of a bean manager there that we kind of got a handle on there. We were able to ask it for to give us a new instance of this class, and we can kind of make this a little more complicated. Let's do something interesting here. What's a typical DI demo here? I'll create a thing called, like, I don't know, TextMunger. So I'll create an interface here called TextMunger, and then I'll go ahead here and I'll create like a uppercaser, and it'll implement TextMunger. Why don't I make my default size here bigger so you guys can see this better? Colors and fonts. Font. Let me see, 16, size 16. That's pretty nice. Good. And I'll say, implements TextMunger. And what does TextMunger do? Let's actually do something. Let's make it munge text, like so. Text in, text out. And so my uppercaser, well, what does it do? It's going to do something completely redundant, which string already has support for. It's going to make it uppercase. But I mean, the purpose is to demo this stuff, right? It's not so. And what else can we do? We're going to implement another version of this lowercaser. And of course, it will do the two lowercase, which Java obviously has support for. So I'm going to show you how the client-side bean manager works now. So we have two of these classes here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this dependent annotation on them, which I'll explain. Now, this is one of the first times that we sort of I'm sort of moving away from the absolute adherence to the CDI standard. By default in CDI, everything that doesn't have an explicit scope is a dependent bean. What dependent means is that the scope of that class is dependent on the scope on which it's injected into, which is like the equivalent of saying it's as if you called the new constructor from the class that's calling it into, and that instance lives and dies by its bean for which it has the bean that's injected into. So that's the default scope. Now the reason why we require you in Errai to specify this on all beans that you're going to want to be able to look up from the bean manager is we are trying to save code. Because if we were to have pure adherence to the CDI specification, we would have to create a bean management code for string buffer and string builder and big decimal and big integer. Because in CDI, those are technically, if they have a default no-arg constructor, they're technically like a dependent bean. And so what we've decided to do is this is kind of similar to the discussion about serializability and GWT RPC. We've decided to go down the path of saying, okay, well, we're going to require that you put one extra annotation on all the classes that you want managed by the manager, so we can trim out code that we don't need. That's where it comes from. So what I want to do now in my app, right, is I want this app to have a TextMunger. In fact, and I'll go ahead here and inject that, like so. Now, you're probably already detecting that there's a bit of a problem here, and IntelliJ is noting that there's actually two possible things that could get injected right here. Now, if I start this up, it will fail. It will be like, I don't actually understand what you want me to put here because I see two implementations of this interface. So CDI has this concept of qualifiers, which are annotations, and I'm going to create one now called upper. And I'm going to make it a qualifier here, and I need to give it a retention of runtime. Oops. Why aren't you auto-completing IntelliJ? Like so. And I'll make another one here. I'll just copy this class, make one called lower. So now what I'll do is I'll put lower on lowercaser and upper on uppercaser. And go back to my app here, and I'm going to say that I actually want to inject the upper. Now, so I'll go over here now, and we'll just say munger.munge hello world. This isn't particularly that impressive yet. This is just showing you that we have like the full regular CDI programming model here. Now in theory, the actual thing which provides the uppercaser could be in some other module that you import. You might not actually be responsible for that. So what this does is it starts giving you it starts giving you a ability to start separating the actual implementation from the actual API. So this in a large application, and we see people doing this already today with Errai, is you might have an API package which defines a lot of these meta annotations, which can then be used to either provide mocks for testing, or a specific implementation for the type of browser that you're in, and so. We have some of that here, but it actually gets even cooler than this, because that's just simply explicitly putting an annotation on the actual injection point. Turns out that we actually have access to the full bean manager at runtime, and we'll go ahead here and we'll inject this here. I'm going to inject the sync bean manager. And I'll talk about why it's called the sync bean manager and not the async bean manager in a second. Let's go over here now and actually let's leave that there for a second. Let's go to my event handler here. And now what I'm going to do is do something crazy. I'm going to uninject this munger, and I'm going to say bean manager dot lookup beans. For the type textmunger.class. And I'm going to iterate over that, like so. And then I'm going to do something crazy, like go textmunger.getInstance.munge my field.getValue. So now what's going to happen? Well, so what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to look up every single bean which is assignable to that textmunger type, and I'm going to ask the bean manager to give me an instance at runtime, in the GWT translated code. And so what I expect to happen now is I'm going to click this, and I'm going to get one of my outputs back, which is lowercase, and the other one which is uppercase. And you can see this is actually really powerful, because this is the beginnings of essentially a plugin type framework. And in fact, this is exactly what we see people using it for in a lot of cases. So if I go ahead and say, hello world, and I hit click me now, actually we did nothing.
You forgot to.
Oh. What did I not do?
You didn't use the output of that.
But you didn't use the output of the line.
Oh, that's true. Sorry, I only got about 5 hours of sleep last night, so silly mess-ups are inevitable. So I say hello world here, like so, and then we get hello world, and then we get the lowercase hello world there. And you can see we were able to do this. We can do full dynamic lookups. We can actually ask it dynamically for a version of that bean which is annotated with a specific set of qualifiers as well, and not just the type. So this is a very powerful thing. But I showed you guys the sync bean manager. So we have this concept of asynchronous bean management, which is a brand new thing that we've added recently, which is a way of using code splitting in GWT through the dependency injection. So if I actually go over to my little thing here called Errai app properties, I got this little thing here called the async bean manager, which I'm now going to turn on. And what this lets me do is I can actually now go back here to, let me get rid of this for a second. Now it's good if I try to compile it at this point now with the async bean manager on. It's going to complain and say that the sync bean manager doesn't actually exist. It's not exposed with the async bean manager on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject the async bean manager instead, and you'll see suddenly there's a serious problem here. Let me get rid of this here like so. And we'll assign this here, and this time we get these asynchronous bean definitions back, and I will go ahead and I'll rewrite this. Oops. I'll iterate over that, and now we have like a nice nice version of this that allows us to actually get the instance, but this time we can actually specify a creational callback, and this would be, of course, really nice if we had this code would start looking a lot nicer with like Java 8 lambdas and stuff, but we'll get to that, I think, in the next few days. So now we can actually, in this callback now here, call bean instance.myfield.getText. And so what this does now actually is actually this will do nothing. This will run like basically almost synchronously but if we actually go ahead here and add like load async to this guy and uppercase load async to this, what Errai will do now is it will surround inside the generated code, the actual code that would construct these objects with run async calls, which are then wrapped, of course, around that creational callback. And of course, this isn't going to work in dev mode, but I can show you, like, you can see that still worked. And so this is a new feature in Errai 3.0. I think the first time I've actually publicly demoed it, that allows us to fully take advantage. And actually, what's interesting, I should say, is that all of the actual injections into all beans are done asynchronously with the async bean manager. So we actually internally look at the actual injection graph, and we actually try to figure out better ways to split the actual graph up based on reachability analysis of the graph. I won't get too much into that because I'm just trying to just give you guys like an overview of like what the sort of programming model that we add into the GWT ecosystem here.
I see a server there. Are you gonna by any chance show the bus and the server observable event stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is all client-side stuff. We can be informal here. I'll take Ray's suggestion, and I'll move more into the client server-side world, and then I'll try to end on the client-side JPA. So we've built this app together, and everyone's familiar with what it does. So I think we'll keep going with it. But this time I will this iteration of evolving this code, I will add some server-side components to this and show you how the CDI programming model between the client and the server can actually create a really nice distributed application. So I'm going to go ahead and into my server package here, which is your standard GWT server package. And I'm going to create a server-side bean. And this is actually a CDI bean that will be deployed into the server and will be managed by the application server. And I'll just call it, like, my server-side bean because it's obvious to everyone what it does. This is an application scoped bean. For those of you not familiar, application scoped is very much like a singleton, except it means that it's tied to the scope of that application in the EE definition of what an application is within an application server. Whereas a singleton, as of in CDI 1.1, has been a little bit overloaded to mean something slightly different. So, for example, you can have multiple applications that are part of an EAR in J2EE, and if you have singletons which are part of the shared class path, then it's actually a singleton across all those applications. Whereas application scope beans are only scoped to that application. But you can think of it as a singleton. I explain that just for posterity's sake. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this bean? Well, I'll do the funnest thing first. I'll create an event class, and I'll call it hello server event. And how do we create an event in CDI? Well, it turns out I've already done so, but I'm going to do something here which is Errai specific. I'm going to make it portable. Now, a portable type it's just our word for serializable. We use that word, well, let me just show you first before I describe the implications of what portability means in Errai. And actually, you know what? I like immutable types, and actually one of the things I like to show off in Errai is the fact that we can do immutable marshalling. So I've made that final. We have this little maps to annotation here. We're going to tell it that that constructor parameter maps to the text property of this bean. This actually tells the Errai marshaller how it can construct this deconstruct and construct this object across the wire, and that way we can actually create like a mutable entities for moving across the wire. And that's what I've done there. And I'll go ahead back into my app class here, and we have this on-click my button. We have all this crazy stuff going on there. Maybe I'll reuse it for something fun. I'm going to inject the event here of hello server. Jay thinks I should call it hello server event. I think that's a really nice suggestion. So any regular type can be an event in CDI. It's a really nice feature. And this event class is part of the CDI specification. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take this event producer thing, and inside my little callback here where I call the munger and munge the text over everything, I'm going to fire an event for each of them based on the bean instance munge.myfield.getText. And so we'll end up firing two events. Oops, I need to actually construct an object, don't I? For hello. Let's make this more readable. I'll assign that to a variable. So what I'm doing is I'm creating one of those hello events and passing to its constructor the product of the munge call over that my text. So I'm going to type something in, and we already know that it's going to get called twice because I have two mungers that will be looked up from that type, and I'm going to fire two of these events. Now, there's two things that can happen, right? Since this is on the client side, it's going to go into the local event bus, and anything on the client side which is observing this event will receive these events. It'll receive two events, and they can react to them. But this is a portable event type, and I'm going to go over to my server here, and I'm going to using the standard CDI programming model, I'm going to say observes hello. And there's a little there's a little observes annotation here. I'm going to say it observes hello server. And so this is all standard CDI programming model. Nothing that's on this screen right now is anything Errai specific. You can deploy this code to any Java EE6 compliant container, and it will be happy. But the real magic is that Errai has a CDI portable extension which is actually going to link the event bus from the client code to the event bus that's running on the server using standard CDI programming. So this is standard CDI code here, and we're just gonna fire this event. So I'm gonna have to restart this now and deploy this new stuff, and we'll see if we should be able to see in the server log when I enter this. We should receive two events on the server and print out that text. And let's clear this out here. See what I can see, and I'll type hello world again, and I'll hit click me, and lo and behold, nothing happened.
I think it's an exception.
Was there?
Well, you're in the dev mode screen. You need to go to the server tab, right?
Just do the documentation.
Interestingly, refresh, test. Well then, what have I done wrong?
There was a stream corrupted exception.
Okay. I would have thought. Actually, you know what? I bet you there's actually nothing. I think that's just the cache.
Yeah.
It's just yeah. This is. I think this is just a bit of a bug that I have with IntelliJ IDEA that doesn't correctly refresh the stuff when I deploy it to the server. I think doing a clean and restart will actually ameliorate this problem. I don't think it's... I'm showing you guys actually our bleeding edge stuff, so you know, if I don't have bugs, that's actually really lucky. So there we go. That worked. Yeah, it was just I had to do a Maven clean because it was just a cleanliness issue. My IDE wasn't correctly packaging the stuff up for deployment to the server. But now that it has done so, you can see that the server actually received those two events, and that was all I had to do, right, to send those events asynchronously to the server. They got created locally in the Beam Manager, and we constructed 2 of those events, and all we did was hit fire. And because the server was observing them, we were able just to react to them. But the other interesting thing is we can actually go the other way. So let's do something here. I will create a new beam, and I'll call it time event. What does the time event do? Probably tells us the time. So how do we like communicate time? Well, I'll just create a thing called millis here and give it a getter. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before because I really like. Now you don't have to create immutable entities. You can just in Errai just create like a standard beam with setters and getters, and it will be completely happy with that. But I'm pretty anal about doing it this way. So in response to sending a hello world event, let's have the server send an event back, and let's observe it in the client in the same way that we observed it on the server. And the way we do that, of course, is I'll create an observer over here called. In fact, I can make it private just to show off here. I'll say observes time event. And so when we receive a time event, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, let's actually go ahead. Let's go over to our template, which I'll do here by hitting Control-T, and let's go ahead and put something here that we can actually attach data to. I'll create a span data field called time, like so, and go back to my bean, and let's create a label called time. And so when we observe a time event, we'll just say time.setText event.getMillis. Just do it cheaply, convert it to a string there. And let's do the opposite of what we did on the client. I'll inject the time event thing here, which is the identical API we used on the client. Time event. There's Java for you. And we'll fire a new time event with the server's current time, like so. And so if I go back to my app here, and I do have to restart, unfortunately, we actually have a really awesome plugin from the guys over at Zero Turnaround that actually negate the need to restart when you change server code, but I don't actually have the JRebel plugin installed right now locally.
Again, I saw that string corrupt exception go by again.
It's fine.
So IntelliJ won't do hotspot?
It will if you are debugging, but it's not as reliable. Like if you there's things it can't do. You can't introduce new types. There's things like that. JRebel's a much nicer solution and actually works really well. I just haven't had time to set it up. Then I recommend people. So you can see that that's actually the server time that came back from the server, but that's pretty cool. But I want to kind of show you what's actually really going on here. I'm going to create an executor here. I'll make it a new scheduled thread pool here with like one, and I'll say schedule at fixed rate, runnable. I'm going to move this here, and I'll be like 0. I don't know. Every 100 milliseconds, oops, time unit milliseconds, like so. Needs another comma there. I'll restart this one more time. Now, of course, every time we receive an event, we're going to start one of these new executors, which is not Probably not a good idea for production code, but I'm really trying to demonstrate things here. And we come up here, I'm going to say like test, and I'm going to click me, and you can see that we're actually firing one of those events and observing it on the client every 100 mils. The stuff in the dev mode stuff is getting angry here because of the back and forth of the dev mode server. But you can see that we didn't actually do anything special to handle the push there. I didn't create any special servlet or anything like that. And the way and what's actually happening here is that we have a technology called Errai Bus, and when you use an Errai application and have the server-side component, we actually have a distributed message bus technology where the client actually, well, let's look. If I actually open up the GWT dev tools here, you can actually see very, very delayed here. Let me. Didn't realize how far back the actual stream the stream to the overhead projector is actually lagging really far behind.
Yeah, it's like
my
a
local
few seconds.
Yeah. So you can actually see it here in the JavaScript console. Like if I actually go up here, you can see this is actually the Errai Bus status. It's currently connected, and it's actually using active channels SSE. So it's actually using server sent events right now. You can see it actually has like multiple transports it's capable. It currently supports with the current server HTTP plus server sent events. It also has HTTP long polling. It also has support for WebSockets and HTTP short polling. What's really cool about Errai is it actually does a capability analysis. So when it connects to the server has a list of capabilities, and you can configure the Errai Bus server to do whatever you want. We actually have two different WebSockets implementations. We have a standalone one that we wrote ourselves on top of Netty, and it's an Errai Bus WebSocket server, which you can use and works really great in dev mode. But it's a sideband server, so it runs on a different port. We also have support for JBoss AS7, which is a built-in WebSocket, so it can actually run on the same port as the application server, and that's preferable for security reasons and such. But the cool thing is that this is how we're doing the push. The push to the client is using this nice transparent bus technology, and it works great actually. It works on works on the iPhone, it works on Android, and it has like lots of cool fallbacks to different technologies depending on what's available on the network and on the device and such. I'm almost out of time. I showed you that, but I want to show you one more thing. Can I cut like 5 minutes into my question and answer time? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna go into lunch anyway.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to show you about like working with this stuff is client-side JPA. This is one of my new favorite things that we've been doing in Errai, and I'll just continue to make this current app that I've been working on more complicated. Why not? I'm gonna just create a new class here. I'll call it, I don't know, registration. And I want it to be a JPA entity, so I'm going to give it the JPA entity annotation. And it's going to have like an ID, right, and like a name. And of course, the ID, I'll have a generated value, and I'll tell that it has the ID. That's what that's for. And then I'll create a getter and getters and setters for it. Like, oops, back. And so this is a standard JPA entity. I'm now going to go back into my app here, and I'm going to inject the entity manager. And this is the standard JPA entity manager, and you'll notice this is client-side code, and so we're going to inject that here. Instead of, I'm going to just steal this button handler method again for my new purposes, so we can just move forward here. And so now when I click the button, what I'll do is I'll create one of these registration objects, and I'll set the actual name to whatever's the value of the text field that I have in my app here. And then what will I do? Well, I'll just call entity manager dot persist registration. And what's that going to do? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to start this up. So I'm just going to type hello, and I'm going to hit click me. I haven't programmed any user feedback, so I didn't expect any. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the window.localStorage object here now and look at this. And you can actually see that, actually there's some, I was playing around earlier, you can see these two foo objects are still in the local storage. That's actually from me playing around with this demo earlier when I was confirming that there were no bugs in the current build of Errai. But there's the actual registration object I just persisted. You can see it converted it to JSON. You can see that it has the entity type thing there, so it's recording the actual Java type. And we can actually do some pretty interesting things with this. If I can sort of, oops. Something is weird here. Oh, I know it's weird. We can actually now take this registration widget, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my app markup thing here, and I'm going to go like div, data field, list of registrations. So go back into the app, and I'm going to inject this really cool thing called a list widget for registration. And I'm going to create a thing called registration widget. List of registrations. And I will get IntelliJ to create that for me. It's going to be a registration widget. It's going to actually, well,
What did you use the plugin to do?
It's fine. But the plugin will actually help me a lot. I'll just go make it extended, and I'll say templated. Actually, I'll show you something really cool quickly. See, notice how we have this div data field root. I'll actually put my template here. I'm going to call this my registration widget, and inside here I'll have like a span. I'll have a span data field name like so. If I go back into my registration widget, I can actually say, use the app HTML, and you'll see that we get all these little options here. I'm going to say root this widget at that registration widget node. And then now when I go here, I can say inject data field name, like so. You can see that that was the only option there because it actually parsed the actual DOM and saw that that was the only option. And I'll create like an inline label here. Called name. What I'm going to do is I'm going to inject the model for this, which is actually the same thing as my JPA entity, which is registration, of course. And I'm going to say that this is bound. And yes, that's true. I have to tell the framework at least that this is a bindable widget, and now it's all nice and happy. And what I'm going to do is implements has value, and hopefully this will work, and that will be the end of my presentation, which I believe it will. Just know it has text, right? What is hold on a second, what is this requiring me to use?
Anyone that has value T,
right? It should implement, has model, sorry. Has model, registration, like so. Now we go like so, and we return the registration, and I just got to make this hit. The tooling should really do this for me. This is brand new tooling. I have to do one simple thing here. I have to tell Errai that this is the model setter. I don't have time to explain that, but I'll go data field here, list of registrations to make that work. And now, one more thing. I go registrations. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a named query. I'm not going to have any time for questions, so you guys will have to ask me questions at lunch. Question period. So I'm going to create a name. I'm going to go all, and I'll create a query here. I'll say select select A from registration. Oops. A sort by actually, yeah, sort by A. Oh, order by. I'm silly. So order by name, like so, and back to my app. So now here I'll put in post construct here. I'll put one on load. Oh, I can't. Yep. Now I can say, entity manager dot create named query. I called it all, right? That's what I called it.
Yeah.
And I go get results. Results list, like so. Oh, get result for registration. Class. All. And I will just say list of registrations dot set value all, like so. And I should be able to refresh. Oh, where's my? I've lost my thing. I think it should all work now. So actually, I expect to see my registration still be there because I made that registration to local storage. So when Chrome loads up here, we should actually see that registration I just made gets rendered. Assuming I've done nothing silly, which I apparently have. I did what wrong? Undefined method in class. Oops. What did I do? What? Surely not. Well. Yeah, I might need to try one more clean. Where is my registration widget? It's right here. It's templated. Insert model. I will try that. We haven't fully cleaned up the integration with IntelliJ, so if that doesn't work, it'll be quite disappointing. Had pretty good luck today. No. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to want to work today. Just confirming that I've done everything correctly here. But nope. It actually does look like I've run into a bug, which is funny because I basically typed out this exact same demo. The bug looks like it's generated bad code, but like I said, this is 3.0, which is not expected to be release ready until the fall.
We trust that it does magic things.
Right.
Yeah. we trust it.
But I mean, what it's supposed to do basically is run the JPA query and then basically populate the template.
Yes. It was supposed, in theory, this should have, yeah. I mean,
it should be error materialized.
Well, we can let you work on it during lunch.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would. I mean, it actually looks like. See, you can see it. I actually tried to proxy the registration widget here, which is a little bit of inside baseball into how Errai worked. It actually is not finding the actual proxy method that is used to set the data binder. So this does look like I've hit some sort of some sort of bug in our new code. This is actually a new feature. This whole ability to like inject a model and have it all tied together nicely is a new feature. So it looks like I've run into a small bug there, but you always run the risk of doing that when you're demoing basically alpha quality code. So that's my presentation for today. I wish I could have shown more. I mean, that's really, I mean, honestly, it's like I've showed you maybe about 20% of the feature set, but if anyone else has any questions in the next 2 days, of course, I'll be around. You can ask me questions now.
It's a few minutes because we're going to do lunch anyways. So
One question on where you basically create the HTML and then overlay a widget on that. How does that work for more complicated widgets that's not just an input field or a div?
Cell list or something.
So the way it works for more complicated widgets that we don't understand, that we haven't programmed for, what we do, and this is documented, is we will take that DOM node, we will take all of its style attributes and all of its DOM attributes. We will then construct a new GWT widget, and we will copy those attributes onto that the actual DOM element that the GWT widget creates, and we will replace that element. We will replace that element in the DOM with the GWT created one.
So you'll basically remove child, copy over all the style stuff onto the construct a GWT widget, which creates a temporary element. Copy over all the stuff that was on the actual element, and then we remove parent that remove child that base element, and then get element on the GWT widget, and then add that in.
Yes,
So,
that's what we do.
so what if the designer is actually wanting to style, say, an inner piece?
So this is a feature, actually. We consider that. So we thought about that, and that we actually realized what's great. It's actually a great thing that it deletes all the children, because with the data fields. Because when designers create mock-ups, they tend to create they put image placeholders and stuff into the element and the child. And it turns out when we started testing it that it actually was a happy feature that what we did was we replaced all of the children with the new element, because what it would do is
sample data.
It would basically
You just load up with your browser with nothing and see what it's going to look like, or what it should look like.
And so basically, you end up overwriting the sample data, and it ends up just working nicely with very little modifications to the template. So it actually ends up being a fairly useful feature that we delete the children from those points.
Sure, I understand that, but what I'm thinking about is, say, like you're using a date picker, and they wanted to style the individual cells. How can the designer actually do that?
There's nothing stopping you from using GWT widgets in a traditional way and compositing them into Errai UI templates. In fact, we've done that. I've done that before. You can actually take a UI binder made widget and inject it into an Errai UI managed template. We don't have any everything that we're doing is completely compatible with the way that GWT widgets typically work. So there's absolutely no restrictions on you having a hybrid app that has widgets that were made with UI binder, or they were hand constructed and coded and then just injected into the DOM of the template.
It's a problem in general of sub-styling the interior of composite widgets like that. Right now, Chrome is working on this thing called the Shadow DOM and the Web Components spec, which is basically already today you have composite widgets in the browser, which basically the designers can't style, or they can only style it because the CSS committee basically came up with some extra properties that let you do it. But basically in general, if you have an arbitrarily complex widget, to allow some high-level designer to assert something about the stuff that's inside of it is kind of difficult. I think the Web Components spec basically is trying to make it more, make components basically more more hermetic, more encapsulated, so that you can consume a third-party template, and then basically also know what you can style inside of it. But I think it's just difficult in general to even with the Web Components. If you look at it, it's not perfect, and you're going to end up editing the source of the other widget, the third party, no matter what.
I can tell you though that in practice the Errai UI stuff's probably been our biggest selling point. We've had really excellent feedback from it. In fact, just yesterday, someone was tweeting about how they like moved completely over to it from UI Binder, and they were really, really happy with it. It turns out like that you know that it works quite well. I mean, this just basically taking like regular HTML and then just compositing GWT widgets into it is actually a pretty good solution for GWT. And
I assume there's bidirectional compatibility too, right? Because they're basically composites anyway. So you could probably inject a UI Binder like template.
Yes, no, we do, and in fact,
vice versa, right?
It works fine. I mean, so if you want to inject like a UI Binder type thing, all you would do is like you can take like this is like if you take this inject off, and instead construct a value here, and you can do this any time before a post construct. This now means push this into the template and overwrite the DOM element for a data field name. So, I'm sure this well, I can't do this because I have it broken right now. But if I had done this and I typed this here, when I loaded up this widget and loaded it here, that's actually what you would see appear in the DOM at this span element would actually be replaced by that inline label. Now that I've removed inject, so it is push and pull, depending on whether or not you have an inject there. Inject means pull from the template, and data field on its own means push to the template.
What's the story on the CSS sites?
It just worked. In fact, I have I was going to show how easy it is to use Bootstrap, but I ran out of time.
Is it like client bundle based, or do you have a different solution for CSS?
No, you can still use resource bundle quite easily with it. In fact, we have someone who's working on that right now to make it even easier. We do have plans to make it easier to take advantage of like resource bundle and style bundle and APIs and stuff in Errai 3.0. We have some pretty awesome ideas about how we can make that a little bit easier. But like I said, there's really what you need to think about when you look at Errai UI though is that this template is just backing a composite widget, and anything and everything outside of that, up to and including the way that you could typically style a GWT application, still applies. We've designed this very carefully to make sure that all of those assumptions hold true. So if you want to basically build a widget with this HTML and make it back a composite widget, and then programmatically style it or style things like in a traditional way with GWT, it still works fine.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that UI Binder provides is that you have that inline UI style tag that basically generates essentially the style resource for you, right, inline. And then basically you can refer to those styles like, in the template.
Yes.
Via some magic syntax. And then so basically those you translate down to like a function call against the clam bundle, right? To give the resource.
No, we're doing the same thing. So we will generate code that will apply styles in the code that we actually generate, because we're generating DOM calls and to this stuff. We will support in Errai 3.0 like resource bundle stuff in the exact same way. So you'll be able to we'll have syntax for that. So you'll be able to just generate code and have that happen from the GWT resource bundles. Because the one thing that it's not showing up here. I was gonna show you the code that actually Errai generates to back this, but it's not showing up in my ID there. I don't have the flag turned on to dump it there.
So beyond like just basic learning curve, it sounds like it was designed where you could iteratively just start, I'm gonna use Errai here, and then I'll switch over maybe existing applications slowly since it's compatible with everything. What would be the cost of adding Errai into something? And do you have long compile times? Is it more client-server communication? What?
We have it depends, right? I mean, a lot of our stuff is take it or leave it. It's not a monolithic framework, actually. It actually is a very modular framework. If you look at the GWT XML file that I've created here, you'll see that I'm explicitly bringing in a lot of different Errai modules into this. And they're not all required. You can use Errai without CDI. You can just inject the bus, like the message bus I showed you today, and you can use it programmatically in a GWT application. And many people do. In fact, we have a lot of users who don't use any of the programming model stuff I showed you today, but use our message bus for pushing stuff to the clients. And you can rely just on that and just bring in that module. You can actually use our IOC container, which is like JSR 330, which is a much simpler dependency injection container without CDI. So it doesn't have events or anything like that. And you can just use it for like wiring the stuff together. And you can see that there's actually both those dependencies. There's the IOC container, and then there's CDI, which extends the container. And so so we've actually built it really modularly, and you don't have to use everything. You can leave things out. And so I've imported almost every single feature here, but they're not required. Even Errai UI is an optional feature. We have people who are building Errai CDI applications with just GWT UI binder. They don't have Errai UI as a dependency, and so we don't have to bring that in.
Your templating language, does it support things like loops and conditions?
It's not a templating language. It's literally just an HTML template.
Okay.
So there's nothing equivalent to, say, like in Angular templates where you can tell it to basically like loop on a DOM element. We don't do anything like that. We actually render out the HTML template as is.
Okay.
If you go into the Resources tab in Chrome DevTools on a deployed Errai application and look at those templates, you'll see that they look exactly as they did in your IDE when they're served out.
Okay, so you write loops in code, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry for going over.
Yeah, so we have a box lunch